Hello, Barra Khan. How are you today?
I am good, Ronen. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. So, just for those who don't know, how do we know each other?
Well, it just so happens that we were actually married for 20 years.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah, I didn't think you forgot that one.
Yeah, no. No,
No.
in fact, I was one of those many distracting thoughts that pop up in my meditation in the morning was, oh my goodness, we've known each other this year, or by the end of this year, we will have known each other for 40 years.
Oh, God, that makes me feel old.
But you're young.
True, that's true. It is 40 because we met when we were 30.
Yeah,
Wow,
1984.
that's right. I'm
1984.
still a little older than you.
Yeah, as you will always be.
I will always be that. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So this is the first of what I hope will be several conversations. I'd like to, and I loved what you suggested for one of the topics. I think it's a really uh, interesting topic, and the more I've thought about it, the more interesting it became. And that is how on earth, um, what almost 20 years since we were married, are we where we are now, which is in what I feel like is a heart open, warm relationship, and we're collaborators, and you continue to inspire me, and I've learned from you as my teacher at the Institute of Core Energetics, and
Thank you.
so how do we get from there, which was not always this rosy, to
Mm,
here?
mm,
So what do you
mm.
think?
Well,
Want to take the first stab?
perhaps we have two different perspectives. I don't know. I'm guessing we do.
I'm sure we do.
So you want to hear my perspective?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective. I think what would be most interesting is what you mentioned the other day, which is we have people in our lives who kind of look at us talk to each other and say,
Mm,
"Wow, they seem to be on pretty good terms." How do you get from divorce to that?
yeah. Um, so without getting too much in the weeds, there were several this is from my perspective. It was a pretty dark period for me in my life. And I just like one day after we separated, I think about, I want to guess like 18 months or maybe as long as 2 years in, I woke up one day and I said, I do not want to be angry for the rest of my life. I
Right.
do not want to live that way. I was about 2 years into my core energetics training, and there was a real aha when I learned that I do not have to be a victim to this situation and to these feelings that I felt attached to or stuck to, right, righteous about. And that if I figure out how to take ownership of my part in everything that happened, then I could maybe start to let it go.
Mm.
And that was the beginning of my big transformation and my big healing. I think everybody has like a aha, like light bulb go off when they do this work that transforms them into the next steps and helps them let go of what they're holding on to. So then began my journey of letting go of what I had been holding on to, and the world changed. My world completely changed for me.
Yeah.
So that was a very important piece that I think I would not, I mean, I don't know, maybe I would have gotten there in another way, but it was absolutely the core energetics training that got me to the other side of that.
Hmm. Interesting. I was musing this morning about this conversation, and one of the many things that came up for me was um, my recollection is that you were present at all of the videotaping of Jerry Judd's interviews that he did with our friend Roger.
Yeah.
And it's my recollection that there was an entire episode spent on forgiveness. And And so there was a moment for me, and I don't remember what precipitated it or if it was a gradual process, but where I started to forgive both of us because we each played a part in it,
Mhm.
and the forgiveness started to melt the anger.
Mm.
Um, and I think that was an important piece. I think one of the quotes from that interview that Roger did with Jerry was something like, I've led thousands of Shalom mat trips, and I've yet to experience one that did not involve forgiveness.
Mm.
Yeah, and so I think our separation and divorce was a massive mat trip,
Yeah.
um, and we were supported in it.
Oh, yeah, but there is a certain you have to have a certain willingness and readiness to get to the other side of that, and willingness to let go of the attachment to the anger and to the righteousness, and, I just knew that I didn't wanna live that way
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
rest of my life. I didn't wanna be a old angry woman. And I also felt like, I felt like I owed it to our boys to not like continue to suffer. And I mean, for myself also, but I attribute a lot of my letting go to, well, I didn't want them to see that and to live through that, and to, they were impressionable teenagers.
right, right. Yeah,
So,
and there was a moment when we started early, and when Core Energetics came back from the pandemic and was meeting in person, and I remember there was an occasion. I'm thinking of the boys. That was an occasion where one of our sons was going through something, like they do. And we said, well, let's have a joint conversation with them. And we, from the Institute, we called them on a video call. And
oh
I
yeah,
seem to recall you saying, I'd like to see them see us sitting together talking to them.
yeah. That was on a break during the practice building workshop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. I think that was nice for them.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. So yeah, our son certainly played a big part of it for me. I was also noticing that a whole lot of the same things that drew me to you nearly 40 years ago are still true. I mean, you still have this incredible life force that I found then and find now
Hmm.
wonderful to be around,
Thank you.
and there's much I have admired about you back then when I first met you, and admire about you now. And so when we kind of take this primary intimate relationship piece of it out, the rest of it is still there.
Yeah. Well, one thing I remember thinking, as we separated, was you saying, "We're still family. We're still family," and it was really hard. I remember that was really hard for me to wrap my brain around. You said, "We're still family. It just looks different." That was a hard one for me.
Yeah, sure, sure. And yet, as I look back at pictures, let's say, of my parents' funeral,
Mhm.
and see you in attendance, and of course you're there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, of course you're there at that funeral.
Well,
Um,
your family became my family.
yeah, yeah. And
Absolutely.
you're my sister Eileen's neighbor, and that
Yeah.
that's a solid connection there, just down the street.
Oh yeah.
And
She was very important to me.
yeah, yeah. And the fact that you and she are in each other's lives as you are is important to me too. I mean, because I really do have this sense of the family continuing, and it's but we had to redefine it. We had to redefine what that
Yeah,
was.
and that was, I mean, that was, I'm, I'm going to say that was not an easy task.
Right.
So, I work with a lot of people who are divorced or struggling through a divorce or struggling to stay married, and redefining and reframing the relationship is quite an interesting thing, because when you think about it, like two people come together when they're young or maybe not young, and they're on the same path, right? They're connected, they're moving in the same direction, same social footprint, and then after a certain amount of years we grow, right? Like we're all different when we're 40 than when we're 20, and we're different than when we're 50 than where we were when we were 35. And so we change, we grow, and sometimes that evolves. People move in different directions. And so the question is there intention to stay together and to come together, and is that workable, or maybe not?
Right.
Some people grow so far apart that it's not salvageable.
Right. Yeah, I think you raise an important point here, and that is intention. Certainly, we had the intention to be loving parents to our sons, but I think there were other intentions involved as well. We wanted to remain in contact through our families. I still have deep, sweet feelings about time spent with your family, particularly your mother. I miss her. I miss
Yeah.
Etty, and so there's an intention to build a relationship that I don't have with all of my past relationships. I had an
Mhm.
intention to build a new kind of relationship with you
Mhm.
that was really essential.
Mhm.
And sometimes folks can't build a relationship because it's just one person is too kind of triggered by the other's presence in their lives. It's just
Yeah.
kind of to be
Or there's
safe.
too much pain
Yeah.
and an unwillingness to touch the pain and to tolerate touching the pain, and knowing that you're working through it, and that working through it actually heals it. If you want to heal, you got to feel. And if you're not willing to do that, then you'll stay attached. You'll hold on to it because you got to move it. It
Yeah.
has to move.
I think we
So,
were also blessed by the support we got from our friends Joy and Lawrence through that period leading up to the separation, even though um, the help they did with us in that couples work that we did with them uh, didn't save the marriage. Um, Looking back on it, I think it may have planted seeds. I still think back to a lot of the revelations I had through the really painful processes that they invited us into. I mean, those morning conversations across the dining room table with each other, where we would just sit down and pour out our hearts one
yeah,
at a time to each other for
yeah,
15 to 45 minutes,
yeah.
and then come back and the very next day and do exactly the same process again for somewhere
Mhm.
between 15 and 45 minutes. And it was hard for both of us to hear
Yeah.
each other's truths. But there was an intention
Mhm.
to speak what was true to each other.
Yeah.
And and of course, that's a lot of the work of core energetics that we both tap into. Like, get in touch with what is so.
Yeah. Can you touch it?
Yeah. Can we touch what is real? My arms are too short to box with God, so I might as well, go get in touch with what is actually there.
Yeah. That
There's
Broadway
also
play.
something you said early on after the divorce, like within the first couple of years after the divorce, that I often say to myself and say to others who are going through similar situations, and that is, you said, "I'm grateful for the marriage and grateful for the divorce,"
Hmm.
and it stuck with me over the last 17 or 18 years.
Well, look, I am committed to lifelong learning, and we don't end our education process when we end our relationship at a university. Like, life is the best teacher that I know, much much better than the university learning. Even though I've got a master's degree and spent many years at a university, but um, life has been the best teacher, and so you don't learn from what's easy and from the good. You learn from the challenges.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. And I think I actually really grew into my being more, and started to develop a relationship to myself that I did not have before that. I
Hmm.
mean, before that dark period, and before my willingness to step in with both feet.
Yeah. That's a beautiful point to make. We got to learn about ourselves there. Right? One of the things I remember from the counseling that Lawrence and Joy gave us was Lawrence saying, "Well, here's what happened when you were 30. Um, each of you," he was speaking to us, "each of you had a notion about what would be the right version of you to present to the other, and created this little avatar. And these avatars met each other,
Mm.
and then they formed a relationship, and they got married, and then they had children, and these avatars weren't actually who either of us were at our core.
Mm.
We
Yeah, I
had,
found that. Or somehow I think that never landed back then.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think about that often. There's a kind of a compassion
Mm.
that I have for myself and for you as I reflect on that. It's like, well, yeah, we were young. I mean, 30 to me is very, very young as I think about it, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, I think we were 29 when we met.
30.
Really? I thought it was November 84, but I could be wrong about that.
85.
85. Oh, that's
December,
right.
December 85. And I started working at ACR.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alliance for Consumer Rights
Yeah.
in
That's right. It was
January of
85.
86.
That's right.
And then we quit together and moved to Tucson in July of all times. Of all times.
July of 86. I remember the first day we were there, it was 111.
It was July 11th and it was 111 degrees. I remember that. And we had all our stuff in
That's right.
storage. And I remember crying myself to sleep thinking, what did I do? I just gave up my Upper West Side apartment in Manhattan to move to the desert.
Oh, and I think that crying happened in a little shitty hotel room next to a freeway.
Exactly. With really loud air conditioning.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny. That's
Yeah.
funny. But so it helps me to bring some compassion to those two young lovers. And because they were doing the best they could, but the best they could was to generate these avatars. And that, I think that hearing that from Lawrence set me on a new dimension of my journey to my own authenticity. I mean, we'd both already been involved in that for decades, kind of the journey to authenticity. But there was something about the way he said it and the context of in relationship, the notion that I built an avatar to present to you when I was 30. And that you were building an avatar to present to me, and that we never, even at 50, by the age of 50, we hadn't yet kind of penetrated to who we actually were, even to ourselves.
Well, I think to some degree, like we're always growing, learning, expanding, and I do hope that I will keep growing, learning, and expanding until I have one foot in the grave or the urn or wherever it is I decide to go. So that was part of the growing and self-discovery. And I'm not saying that I've landed. I hope I haven't landed. I hope that I'm still open and still growing. So that was one piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a really important piece of it, in fact, I'm not even sure that you know about this piece of it, but I may have told you, it's been so long. But a lot of this process started before we started our process together, and it was in one of those annual men's group mini retreats where we did work like we do in Core and like we did at Shalom Mountain, where seven of my dear male friends and I would get together once a year and do 24 hours of together, during which we would do embodied work. And our buddy Roger led my piece of work. And in that moment of crisis, this is before I came to you and kind of confessed my truths to you, I realized that here, one of my closest friends on the planet leading me, he did not know me.
Mm-hmm.
And that nobody in that room knew me. And it wasn't just about particular secrets that I had in my life, but what I saw in that moment was that I had created a version of myself for them. In fact, for each of them, maybe a different one for Roger than for Hunt and Michael, and like a different version. And then that kind of fractals went outward. I thought, oh my God, I've got a different version of me for whoever I happen to be with, whether they're stranger or friend.
Oh, well, it's interesting that you say that. And I probably for your sisters and for me and for your parents and for our children. And I think to a certain extent, we are all in a sense, like we're working toward being more of who we are, but we respond and react in a chameleon like way to the people that we're interacting with. So even today, I mean, I have a different energy, let's say, with Kevin than I do with a girlfriend than I do with our sons, because they send me their energy, I receive their energy, and it's like the communication cycle, right, is circular. So I'm feeding back, of course, unconsciously and behaviorally and responding to what they feed me. And so whatever they're feeding me, it impacts how I react and be with them. So that you were different with each of those people in your life in that intimate grouping of men does make sense to me.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me. I think the difference, though, between what I was seeing then and what I see now, because of course, I have a different me for my clients than I have with our sons, who I get to see on Thursday, or than I do when a month ago I was on a witness stand in a courtroom in
Exactly.
Phoenix. I even wore different clothing. I had put on my monkey suit and had my tie and pocket square, and
Exactly.
had a very different energy. And with the lawyers cross-examining me, and with the jury in the jury box over there, and but of course, the fact that I was unconscious about it,
Yeah.
and actually not even in touch with who I was,
Yeah.
it left me with a sense of deep loneliness.
I understand.
At the
Part
end
of
of that mat trip, that device in me that I spotted that generated all of these avatars for everybody that weren't authentic, about which I'd been unconscious. I named it in that room. I said that I have a name for this guy. He's the slippery MFer.
I do remember that. You did share that with me.
Yeah.
I think part of all of our work, especially when we do the work that we do, is, as Carl Jung said, is making the unconscious as conscious as we can.
Yeah.
Paraphrasing here, it's not exactly the way it's not an exact quote, but that's our work. And when you think about it, like how really, like what part of us is conscious? What is it? 10%? I mean, modern research says no, we use more than, in fact, more than 10% of our brains. Maybe so. You're pretty smart. I think maybe use 15 or 20%. Me too, like 15 or 20%. That means that 80% of us is unconscious,
Right.
and so we're always working to make the unconscious learn more.
Right. Which goes to the answer to the question that I get from folks who are thinking about getting into the work that you and I both do, as a client of practitioners like you and I, is so like, how long does this go on?
Yeah.
How long do you want to learn? Is the answer. That's because it's an educational process as much
Yeah,
as
it's a
anything.
lifelong process. Not that people will necessarily be doing this work for their lifelong, or maybe they will, but I also, when people ask that question, because the question I get is, how long does it take?
Right.
And so my answer is, it depends.
Yeah.
That's the answer. That's the only, and it depends on how much resistance do you have? How committed are you to the process? How consistent are you? How much do you take the work into your life? Do you do your sessions and then close that door and then go about your life and ignore it for the rest of the week? So all those things are relevant in terms of how, quote unquote, how long it takes. How deep is the wounding? How deep is the trauma?
Right.
So all of those things are relevant.
And when I hear how long does it take, I also hear a desire to fix something.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a pretty bad model of the work that we do. I mean, yes, I get that there is so often trauma involved that we're addressing, but the notion of how long, it's like, I was just at the car service today at the dealership getting my oil changed and a couple of things fixed. And to add, but it sounds like the same question. When to me, I frame it quite differently. To me, it's not about fixing anything. It's in the same way that we look at let's say a 1-year-old toddler who's teetering on between can't walk and can walk, and we don't say to that child, how long is it going to take to fix this broken child? How long will it take maybe to move through this phase? But then there's another phase after that,
And then another,
and then another phase.
and another. And the more you do, the deeper it gets. The deeper it gets, the more you do.
So it's an evolutionary process, and there's no endpoint for me, and I hear that there's no endpoint for you. It's because there is no destination. Have you heard that Alan Watts talk about? We were tricked into thinking that it's a journey with a destination, and we get there. We get there, and that's what we were striving for. But then when we get there, we realized, wait a minute, what happened? We realized that we were sold a bill of goods, and what we were supposed to be doing is dancing and growing, creating. And he said, the analogy was great. If it was about getting there, then every symphony would just be one great chord at the end, the finale chord at the end of a symphony. Or to you as a dancer, there wouldn't be the dance at all. We would just get to the point in the floor where you want to finish the dance.
And how boring would that be? Really?
Yuck.
Really?
Then we find ourselves asking, is that all there is?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're singing the song.
We're singing the song, exactly. Well, I think this was a good start on this conversation, Barra. Thanks so much for this. I look forward to the next exploration of something perhaps a little broader about the work we do.